Welcome everyone, they call me IntroTechOut, and it has been over 8 years since we were first introduced to the Dualshock 4 controller. Looking back at it now, it's safe to say that it has been a fantastic improvement over the DS3. While the built-in speaker hasn't really shown itself to be useful, things like the headphone jack, better form factor and the amazing share button have all had a positive impact on the usefulness of the controller. Now with the Dualsense, Sony has again made improvements. The DS4 used to feel premium and made DualShock 3 look like a toy. I don't know if I would say that Dualsense made DualShock 4 look like a toy, but it definitely feels cheap now in comparison to it. I was genuinely surprised that Sony has found so many new features to implement. But I ask you, what is the standout difference between the most recent PlayStation controllers and all other controllers that ever existed? Yes, the large rectangle that takes up the whole center of the controller, the touchpad. And let me tell you, I'm beyond upset that almost no game has actually tried using it. I can think of many ways in which this device can be used to better the player experience, and I will outline some of them this video, even discussing specific games that can make use of it. The best example of the touchpad's potential is sadly still Killzone Shadowfall in my opinion, which was a PS4 launch game. In this game you had a drone that you could use to attack enemies, stun enemies, deploy a shield or to zipline to locations below you. Instead of going for a weapon wheel type thing or using the useful but often occupied D-pad, Guerrilla Games chose to make the commands use the touchpad. Basically, if you swiped into a certain direction, the drone would enter a certain mode. Of course this doesn't use the full potential of the touchpad, which allows for all kinds of inputs, but this implementation was really solid and far from gimmicky. And maybe that was because Guerrilla didn't go all out. If they had instead gone for a system where you had to draw a P symbol to make the drone deploy a shield, or an F to make the drone attack, I wouldn't be praising them right now. This directional swiping might be simple, but really effective and even quite satisfying to do. What I find so weird is that after Killzone showed a glimpse of the potential of the touchpad, every game after it tried its best to ignore it. Even Guerrilla Games themselves with Horizon Zero Dawn didn't use it again. But I bet you're thinking at this point, yeah great that one game found a use for it, but is that really enough to call it a missed opportunity? Well, in my opinion, yes. I have no idea what goes on in game studios, but I do know that controllers have a very limited amount of buttons. When you are making a shooter, you'll need the left and right triggers for aiming and shooting. X to jump, triangle to swap weapons, square to reload, circle to crouch, the left and right stick for moving around, and L1 for grenades. Pretty much by default. This leaves you with only R1 and the D-pad, so 5 buttons to make some mechanics that are unique to your game. Even if we don't do anything special with the touchpad and just keep it to swiping left, right, up and down, we almost double the amount of possible inputs and so double the amount of possible extra mechanics, giving developers more creative freedom. The elephant in the room then is that because Xbox doesn't have as many inputs as PlayStation, developers are still stuck with the old amount. On the one hand, yes this is true, but they are also developing for PC. On PC, users often do get extra features or get quick access buttons. This means this button binding has to be built into the game. I can't say with any certainty how hard or easy it is to make this happen, but I would be surprised if it's impossible. Let's now discuss possible uses for the touchpad. If you have anything to add, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I'll try to refrain from inventing whole new mechanics, instead I'm mostly focused on the quality of life, using just the directional swipes concept as proven by Killzone. These should be the easiest for developers to implement. First possible use, quick access to menus. How often in a game do you have multiple menus with multiple pages, like Borderlands, Horizon Zero Dawn, Witcher 3? You often deal with maps, inventory screens, quest logs, etc. Instead of instant access, these often require multiple button presses. The worst part is, these menus often lag a bit, making scrolling through them a pain. So what if we could bind touchpad swipes to each menu? Being able to instantly access the menu you want would be quite nice, I think. Also, fun fact, Witcher 3 actually has a hidden feature where a touchpad swipe instantly activates the map, but that's the only thing the touchpad does. Still, they'll get a small point for that. Second possible use, eliminating weapon wheels. While the weapon wheel is a great invention, it often slows down or pauses the game. This can be a bigger problem in some games than in others. I love Doom Eternal, but the relentless pace of that game and especially the existence of quick swap combos makes me wish for a way to instantly swap weapons. I think the touchpad is precise enough that even 8 directional swipes would be possible, allowing you to access every weapon. But I think allowing for 4 weapons to be instantly accessed would be great already. I use the BFG, chain gun, plasma rifle and combat shotgun less frequently than the other weapons, so I'd have no problem keeping them in the weapon wheel. especially if this meant the weapon wheel would be divided into 4 parts instead of 8, making it more reliable. The question of course remains, is it actually practical to constantly swipe the touchpad in combat? I don't know, but there are more opportunities here than meets the eye. We can also take the current mechanics that are bound to the D-pad and transfer them to the touchpad. This can be applied to a lot of other games with weapon or gadget wheels as well. The D-pad is often used for slightly more obscure mechanics with cooldowns and stuff. Meanwhile, it's as accessible as the face buttons are. In my first-person shooter Corrupt Momentum, I specifically chose to use the D-pad to switch to one of 4 weapons, and I think it works great for quick swapping. I'd really like to see an instant access system in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Ratchet & Clank PS4 had one using the D-pad, but combined with the touchpad, developers could create a lot more depth here. Third possible use of the touchpad, quick chat. I often get frustrated at the lack of communication in multiplayer games on console. This is something I desperately want Sony and developers to work on, but it doesn't really seem to be a priority for them. A great way to allow for communication without voice chat is a quick chat system. Rocket League has hands down the best example of this. If you press one of the directions of the D-pad in Rocket League, you get a submenu with 4 optional text messages. So there are 4 submenus total with 4 messages each. Press left and then right and you say thanks. Press right and then down and you say close one. Press up and then up and you say I got it. Don't take for granted how awesome this is. With minimal effort, Psyonix has turned 4 buttons into 16 buttons. This type of system could honestly even be used for instantly accessing weapons or gadgets, as I discussed earlier. The game I immediately think of in terms of potential for quick chat is Rainbow Six Siege. The only way to communicate in that game currently is to team kill. So imagine the potential of quick chat combined with a ping system. You could tell players to reinforce a wall or to not reinforce a wall. You could say that you're gonna roam or stay objective. You could more easily communicate enemy positions, call out traps or ask for help. But it's not just quick chat that could use the touchpad for better communication. Introducing the 4th possible use of the touchpad, push to talk. I've become a big proponent for push to talk on console after I built my gaming PC. On console, party chat has ruined everything. In case of Siege for example, being in a party doesn't just mean you won't be able to talk in game, but it also means you won't be able to hear anyone else who talks in game. And because you cannot see which players are in a party, no one is ever willing to talk, because you don't know if anyone can even hear you. Of course you can team up with friends and choose to use the in-game voice chat to talk, but if English is not your native language, like it isn't for me, and if you want to talk with friends about random stuff that isn't game related, which often happens, you're going to annoy the hell out of your teammates. On console you have these considerations and complications, but on PC you can simply have a Discord call open, allowing you to talk with friends, while simultaneously making use of a push to talk function for in-game callouts. Every PC multiplayer game has this. As long as you hold a certain button, everyone in-game can hear you. If you release the button, no one can. This kind of thing would work fantastically on console, if there was a button for it. Well, luckily on PlayStation we have one now. In Rainbow Six Siege, pressing the right side of the touchpad could be push to talk. Simple as that. Now there's definitely a possibility that Sony has set certain rules when it comes to in-game chat, in which case it might not even be possible to use both party and in-game at the same time, but that's on them then, and it should be fixed. So far some of my ideas. Again, these are just quality of life meant for multi-platform games. There's of course a lot of potential with mechanics designed specifically for the touchpad. For example, a genre that you don't really see on console is military simulation games like Arma. I suspect this is precisely because of the small amount of buttons on console. So what if they used a Rocket League type system in combination with the touchpad? Suddenly you could have an air-plug mechanic, rangefinder, night vision, radar, leaning, sitting, toggling different scopes. I think all the main PlayStation studios could and should use the touchpad, because I can think of an effective implementation for almost every exclusive that exists right now. Of course I'm assuming here that they haven't thought about it already, which is a bit naive probably. I specifically remember an interview where an Insomniac developer mentioned that they ran out of buttons while working on Spider-Man, and I'd really be surprised if no one at that large studio brought up the touchpad. So why does nobody use it then? This is something I genuinely can't answer. Is it just that hard to code? Does it end up feeling too gimmicky for them? Is it really just that nobody thinks about it? We might never know. Of course the next concern is that developers will forget about the Dualsense features really quickly, the haptic feedback in particular. I think though that the haptic feedback has really proven itself already. Every game that uses this correctly feels awesome, and I think developers will even enjoy working on it. But as far as the future of the touchpad goes, it's really 50-50. Maybe the start of this new generation will make developers re-evaluate the functions of the touchpad, but honestly most likely is that it will be ignored forever. And on that depressing note, I want to thank you for watching and I'll see you around.